Coming soon to homes all over Ansley. The true story of a place where passions ran rampant.
At our house, we had a great big swing, and Adelaide had a couple of dates out there with a ukulele, and Jeanette and I were peeping through the curtains to watch them.
Where the struggle for survival was fought in the streets.
We had motorcycle gangs. Had one just 2 doors down from the house. We had small rental units with women from Douglasville keeping a lot of gentlemen callers, and we had a lot of fires back in those days.
It's the story of an enclave steeped in secret traditions.
And you see, over the governor's mansion, I think Mr. McClatchy was one that started that, the Santa Claus going over the governor's mansion.
I just claim all responsibility.
Of course, we hung stockings on the mantelpiece, 4 of those white rib stockings, and they were filled with fruits, all the fruits, apples and bananas, and the sticky raisins down in the toe.
Wrapped in a history that would live forever.
The trolleys were orange, just a terrible color. I don't know who decided to. It was before, they didn't call it MARTA then, they just called it trolleys. You know, I don't think it had a name, Atlanta Transit System or something boring like that. But they were orange, they were bright orange. Why in the world would anybody want to paint a bus orange? I don't know. Not yellow like a school bus, but I'm talking about like orange, yeah. It's just awful.
As generation after generation laid claim to Ansley Park.
Yeah, I think what's changed is the people more than the physical neighborhood.
Ansley Park was really a pioneer of the neighborhood movement.
Ansley Park, the video, starring Pete Caldwell, Devereaux McClatchy, Jim Alston, Leon Eplin, Martha Tigner, Jeanette Tigner Blackman, Adelaide Tigner Linden, and Paul Haynes. See how it all began. Hear about the valiant efforts that saved it.
The urban environment is always subject to attack and diminishing its quality. And all we have to do is to make certain that we maintain the quality here.
And then going down in front of the city council and just raising holy unshirted hell. We would routinely turn out 300 to 400 people at every zoning meeting.
And feel sorry for anyone who has ever had to live in Dunwoody.
Wherever Dunwoody is.
Don't miss Ansley Park, the video. Order yours now. This is Ansley Park, one of Atlanta's oldest and certainly still one of its finest urban neighborhoods. The video you're about to watch was created to bring you an entertaining and educational view of what Ansley Park was, what it had, and what it still has today. Enjoy the memories, savor the history, and help us preserve the integrity of this jewel that is Ansley Park.
Well, Daddy, our father was J. Hope Tignan, came to Atlanta and was connected with Mr. Edwin P. Ansley in the development of Ansley Park. And Mr. Ansley was so wonderful that he gave so much property to the park for just parks, like the McClatchy Park and Wynn Park. And he developed the Ansley Hotel, which later became the Dinkler Hotel downtown. And also he went to Cuba. In fact, Daddy and he went together to Cuba. He was thinking of developing some in Cuba and also in Florida. Mr. Ansley was so intrigued with Havana, with their big wide boulevards, that I think that's one reason why the Prado was probably named the Prado, was from the Spanish influence. Ansley Park has remained good because it is a circular place, and that the air here is so much better. Years ago, because we didn't have air conditioning, but if you rode down Peachtree and turned at 15th Street and came into Ansley Park, it was at least 10 degrees cooler. And that was because it was not built as straight up and down streets, you know. We were talking about the man who was the landscaper, and the layout of the land was Mr. Ruff. And somebody asked him, why did he make Ansley Park with all these streets running around? He said, well, anybody can draw a straight line, but it takes an artist to make a curve. There was so many beautiful homes along Peachtree. Right at 15th Street, that was the McRae home, Dr. McRae, and then the high, where the museum is, was the home of the Highs, J.M. High. They owned a department store down on Whitehall Street. And when she died, the last one died, they left their house to the museum, to be a museum. And it was a museum. They had paintings in it at that time. And then later, of course, after the oil crash in Paris, they built the Memorial Hall, and then later the High Museum. A lot of people have said that they thought High Museum was just high art, you know, the top. But it was named after the Highs, J.M. High people. They had a Tudor-style house. At our house, we had a great big swing, and Adelaide had a couple of dates out there with a ukulele, and Jeanette and I were peeping through the curtains to watch them.
Who was it?
He was Tuller. Charlie Tuller. He lived over on Westminster. Good-looking fellow.
He was. He was a nice-looking boy.
How did it work out?
What is that?
How did it work out?
Oh, he went his way, and I did too.
You know, I've never really lived anywhere else. I've lived in this house for 20 years, and I grew up actually not in Ansley Park proper, but over on Monroe Drive. Or Monroe Drive, as they say around here. Back then, Monroe Drive was a dead-end street. It was also the end of the trolley line. There were electric trolleys that ran from downtown all the way out to the city limit, which was also at the end of Monroe Drive, just past where Wilmington Road comes into Monroe. And that's where Monroe turned into a dirt road and dead-ended, and that's where the trolleys turned around, electric trolleys. So Ansley Park was filled in those days with overhead electrical wires, 2 wires for each trolley in both directions. So 4 wires ran down Peachtree, down 16th Street, across Inman Circle, down 17th to the Prado, and then up to Maddox Drive, down the hill there, around Avery, Polo Drive, up Montgomery Ferry, turned left on Monroe, went down, turned around, and came back. And that was a trolley line up through, I think, probably the very late 50s or maybe even into the early 60s when they the city put in the diesel buses. On the other end of Monroe, as it came up toward Piedmont, where Ansley Mall is now, there was Frances Wilson's house was there, and she had horses and cows down there at that time. This was in the 50s, up I think until the early 60s, whenever they built Ansley Mall. It was a cow pasture in the bottom land down there by the creek, and we used to go down there and ride horses. And there were, Piedmont was I think 2 lanes at that time, and there was no light at Monroe and Montgomery Ferry, and I'm not even sure that there was originally there was a light at Piedmont and Monroe. It was pretty much country. That was out in the country. There was a Woods Texaco, and where the laundry is now, there was a Pure oil station. That'll date that. And the one little row of stores where Gene and Gabe's is now, there was a Broyles Grocery, which is where we used to buy all our food, and a drugstore with a soda fountain, and I can't recall what else, a couple of other little places. But that was really all of that was a little crossroads. It was like a little country crossroads, it really was. Oh, another interesting thing that a lot of people may remember is Monroe Gardens.
I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah, at the end of Monroe Drive, where it dead ended, there was a nursery owned by Mr. Monroe, and he owned that property down in the bottom there on the left, just adjacent to where Wimbledon Road comes in now. And his home was there, and his little office, both of which were log cabins, big, really elaborate log cabins. And down in the bottom land, there was a real nice nursery, half of which was a working nursery where he had shrubbery, primarily landscaping shrub type things. But he also had a formal garden that you could walk in down there, and a big clubhouse that was also a log thing. They used to have square dances down there and that kind of thing. It was, I think people could rent it out, or it was available. Had a huge stone fireplace and a big log place, and we'd have picnics and whatever. We'd go down there on Easter, and parents would take pictures of you and all dressed up. And back in the days when they first had color photography and all the colors looked sort of pink and yellow, that was about the only two colors.
What was the governor's mansion like?
Oh, I can answer that. It was gray stone, a very, very dark and imposing looking building, not a graceful building at all. One of those, I don't think there's another house exactly like it in Ansley Park. It was made of a similar gray stone as you see on my front porch here. Like, in fact, that same type of masonry work that you see in a lot of the older houses in the framing of the porch and some of the columns. But the whole house was that way with a tile roof, and I can't recall it was a red or green, I believe. And big porch all the way around, but the house was dark with small windows, and it was imposing and big, but it wasn't particularly graceful, and it wasn't in a style that was cohesive with any of the rest of the stuff. Not, you know, we see so much Tudor and so much of the old, some touches of Victorian, and just generally what I call sort of American type houses. A lot of craftsman houses in Ansley Park, that kind of thing. But Governor's Mansion broke the mold. It was just this giant, massive is a good word for it, damp looking, clunky place. I never was inside, so I don't know. Didn't get any invitations. I couldn't understand it. Didn't invite 7-year-old paper boys to the Governor's Mansion. Basically a different type of person moved in than not the old Atlanta family, a younger group of people who really were coming from a totally different place. And I think what happened, interestingly enough, is that the neighborhood assimilated those people, and what has resulted is the same thing has happened with the people that live here now as originally happened with the architecture. It's eclectic, it's all over the place, it's diverse, it complements each other. It's certainly anything but the original, you know, old Atlanta type families. It's a little bit of everything. A lot of people that aren't from Georgia at all. Lord, people that aren't even from the South. There's a photograph I hope we can get for this thing, and I don't know where it is. It's a photo taken at the corner in 1909 or something like that, at the corner of the Prado and Peachtree Circle, looking toward the old Weinkauf Mansion. There is not a tree in the picture. It is the damnedest thing you ever saw, and yet you can recognize some of the houses. All those trees that are now 80 or 90 years old and towering above the houses, and are the real benchmark of, you know, the calling card of Ansley Park. Didn't exist when this neighborhood. This must have been just a pasture. It was cleared. There's a certain funky factor to Ansley Park. That it's elegant funk, I admit, but it's funk nonetheless. And I don't know how to define. I've been asked to do this. It's a term I use all the time, but I guess if you don't know what funk is, you don't need to know, or you're never gonna know. Hard to describe. But old in-town neighborhoods have it, and it's a type of charm, and it could be have negative overtones as well. But I think artists are drawn to that, definitely, and there are plenty of them around to prove my point.
Jeanette was born in 1911, and I think you were the first
little girl baby born in Ansley Park, and which was wonderful. For me, I didn't know it was so wonderful, but it was.
That's her claim to fame.
Yeah.
I remember as a boy playing out in the street. It wasn't paved then. I remember throwing at the bats. You know, you ever throw at a bat? You throw a bat and the bat chases a stone. We boys had a lot of fun.
And then we went out on Christmas Eve to get our tree. All of us went,
And we got the saw and the hatchet, and we had a little wagon, and we went out to try to find the prettiest tree out here, which we did. And we brought it back that night, that afternoon, and decorated that night. We had the tinsel and the cranberry strings and the popcorn, and of course the star on top.
Of course, there every Christmas, it probably came from Mr. McClatchy. They had the Christmas sleigh, Santa Claus and the reindeer, all lighted up, and the cars would come from all over the city past there to see that at Christmas time.
We had some traffic out here. We couldn't get out of our driveway, just bumper to bumper, all around here. It was just really a sight to behold.
Well, the great thing about Ansley Park is it's so convenient for everything. To me.
So many of my friends live further out, Habersham, Buckhead area and all that. They said, you've really got a great thing with traffic and the location, and they're having to come back and forth, and I get places so much quicker than they can. And as I say, we added on to this place 3 times rather than move away.
I like it. I wouldn't like to live anywhere else.
We did a plan. We divided the neighborhood up into blocks and people and block committees, and everyone participated in putting together the plan. And in 1964, we put out the revitalization plan for Ansley Park. I moved in the early 60s, in 1961, and it was difficult to get a loan. I ended up having to put down a very large amount of equity just to get a loan. But we moved in, and because there was a lot of space, I loved the parks and the beauty of the place. I remember my mother-in-law came by to see the house, and she wanted to know where the young people lived. Why am I moving into this old neighborhood that she had moved out of in her city? Ansley Park was really important to the turning around the city from the abandonment and the disinvestments that took place to where we're now beginning to reclaim the city and return it to a neighborhood consciousness that we didn't have before. One of the features of the Ansley Park plan that was so important is that we established firm borders on where Ansley Park started and where it stopped. It was particularly important on the edges where the Ansley Park backed up to the commercial district on Peachtree Street, because starting in the 60s, when we began to grow along Peachtree Street, there was a number of office buildings built there, and so the office buildings changed the land uses, and they began to exert some pressure on the houses that backed up to Peachtree Street, fronting on Peachtree Circle. One of the original MARTA alignments, as MARTA moved northward in their planning for the North Line, was that one line went right through the houses on Peachtree Circle originally. We were going through some racial transitions in the 50s and 60s, and when the Civil Rights Act of 65 came in, where you could not discriminate in your housing, was adopted, there was a great fear among some of the people living here. And there was a great consternation on their part of a large number of people about what the future really was this going to really thwart our ability to restore the neighborhood? A petition committee, we met in my living room, I remember so clearly, to pass around a petition stating that the people who signed below are going to stay in the neighborhood and welcome whoever wanted to move into the neighborhood. That was sort of a veiled kind of statement that if blacks moved in, that they would be welcome as much as anyone else. As innocent as that sounds today, that was really quite a statement in those days. We've been rewarded by having those of us who like the city, who really enjoy taking part in the variety and the change. The change is catching up with us. So those of us who've been here for several decades are now seeing that the city is coming, the downtown area and the urban area is coming to us, and that we're living now on the fringe of that, and we can begin to enjoy the restaurants and the theater and the Martis line and all of the variety that occurs in what is now uptown. So that the future of Ansley Park is very similar to a few other places in the country. Georgetown comes to mind, but there are areas of Toronto and of San Francisco that are very, very much like this, where you can live in this kind of environment and be in an urban setting. You walk out of this Garden of Eden, and many of us feel, into what is really one of the nicest parts of the urban in the entire metropolitan area. People are very confused about Ansley Park streets. People are fearful. They find one route through, and they always, for the rest of their lives, they use that one route in case they get lost. What I thought of is perhaps we ought to come up with a one-way pattern of streets in Ansley Park, one-way signs, every street being one way, and that every month we would change the signs so that it would actually frighten people to death to come through here, and they would not leave us alone and so forth.
That sounds like something you'd come up with there.
That's from the period of about 1962 to 1968, and that was the critical time because young people, like I was then, had moved back into the park. But there was still a lot of people who owned property in the park who, honest to God, thought that this maze, this neighborhood we live in was going to turn commercial. And so property owners would actually try to run down properties at the edges of the park and 3 or 4 houses in on the thought every time we turned around, I mean, like every 2 months, we were down at the city council before the zoning people, and people were always, it was always, there's going to be a bank branch at the corner of such and such, or there's going to be a grocery store at the corner of such and such. I really think that Tom Branch probably had more to do with keeping the neighborhood motivated and organized and getting onto these things early, and then going down in front of the city council and just raising holy unshirted hell. We would routinely turn out 300 to 400 people at every zoning meeting, and we were fighting things left and right. That is, just as soon as you get through with one, then there would be another one. Many of them were impractical. Many of them didn't make any sense, but to a lot of Atlantans and a lot of the city council at that time, they considered this to be a neighborhood that had run down in the 50s and wasn't coming back. Slowly, through the late 60s and the early 70s, Ansley Park began to get real credibility to the point where a developer would go down to the zoning desk to file something, and the people at the zoning desk would say, hey, you better check it out with the Ansley Park Civic Association. It looked like for a while that commercial development, intensive commercial development, might come through from Peachtree to Peachtree Circle, which of course would cut off a substantial part of the neighborhood. So we chose, and I remember Tom Branch took this position and ultimately made it stand up in court. We chose that alley that is about 400 feet back from Peachtree and runs all the way from Peachtree Circle down 16th Street. And we went to the city council and we said, this is it. This is the dividing line. Anything anybody wants to do on the west side of the alley towards Peachtree, we're not really going to fight. But we're going to fight anything internally from that. And we had several major battles on some houses up on Peachtree Circle that were 1 or 2 houses down from the alley. And we won those, and then those battles began to go away. We were trying to sell a concept of basically an in-town subdivision, and we're doing this at that point in Atlanta's history where a lot of other people, and maybe wiser people, are moving the hell out I mean, that was the 60s is the first real move to Buckhead and Roswell Road, and then folks moved to Sandy Springs, and then folks moved to Dunwoody, wherever Dunwoody is. And so we were trying to do something that was sort of against the cycle of history. We were saying, well, no, we want to live here, and we want to raise children, and we want to have parks, and we've always been an anachronism. I bought my first house on Avery Drive on a Friday afternoon when it was raining, and we were living out off of Roswell Road, and we were supposed to be going to a cocktail party at 6 o'clock. And it had rained, and the expressway was blocked, and I went over and tried Northside Drive, and it was blocked. And then I went over and got on Peachtree, and it got blocked, and I got up to 15th Street. And even though I grew up in this area, in Atlanta, Decatur, I didn't really know Ansley Park. No one's ever been able to find their way through here that doesn't know the neighborhood. And I was winding my way through, and I ended up on Avery Drive, and a fellow was walking out in his front yard, and he was driving into the ground a for sale by owner sign. His name was Arthur Edwards, worked for the state. And I stopped and bought the house. I did go inside. What an interesting cocktail party that was with my wife that evening.
I saw a certain amount of aerodynamic movement there. I mean, you were piercing the airways. More people. That's why you have.
Try to fight the rising sea. Don't fight me when the stars above, and don't fight me. I'm fighting now that loneliness goes. Whatever to get dream a dream together. When I saw you first, the time was